Hi, my name is Mike. Thanks for joining me today on my channel, Technically Church, where I share over 20 years of experience in audio, video, lighting, and multimedia. You can always find out more on my website at technicallychurch.com. Let's jump in. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to set up lower thirds in ProPresenter 7 using Blackmagic ATEM video switchers as well. So I'm going to show you how I do this. I do it using a fill source and a key source. My key source, I use an alpha key. So it's the way I prefer to do it. That way you're not limited at all with colors. So I'll show you how to do a green screen in a different video. But if you do it that way, you're limited to not using green colors, for example, in your fill source. So this does take two outputs in addition to anything else. So you're going to have a fill source and an alpha key source, two separate outputs out of your computer. So you're going to need something like a Blackmagic DeckLink Duo card to have enough outputs. So I have another video that I'll link to that kind of explains the equipment side of this, okay? This video is going to explain how to set it up in ProPresenter with the Blackmagic switcher, assuming you have enough outputs, in this case, two. So the way this works is we're going to load a graphic in that we want to be a lower third. And then we want to put cameras underneath that lower third. So we want the lower third to show up on top, and then on the top 2/3 we want the camera to show up. I'll put an example in here in a picture of what we want the final product to look like. Okay, so the way this works is with an alpha key, and so ProPresenter has a built-in way of sending excuse me, what you want to see, the fill source, and then sending the opposite of that, which is the alpha key. So if it's a shape or if it's text, you'll see the alpha key will be solid white. I'll show you this. It'll be a solid white box, it'll be solid white text, and the Blackmagic ATEM switchers have the ability to take those two sources, combine them together, and essentially stencil it out. Okay, so it's going to take the fill source, it's going to take the alpha source, it's going to stencil it out, and it's going to put whatever's left, it's going to fill with the video camera or whatever other source you have. And you end up with what you want. Hopefully that makes sense as an explanation. So I'm going to show you the screen here, ProPresenter. I'm going to show you how to set this up, knowing all of that. All right, so in ProPresenter or on your computer to start with, assuming you're using a Blackmagic DeckLink Duo card, you have to have the Blackmagic Desktop video software installed for that card to work. So we're going to open up the desktop video setup, and I'll show you how to set this up specifically for lower thirds with the alpha key. So you got your DeckLink Duo card, you've got your 4 inputs here. So I'm going to go back to input 1 and go to settings. You're going to go to connectors, and this is what's important. To do the lower thirds with alpha key, you have to set your DeckLink Duo 1 port to the connector being SDI1 and SDI2. Obviously you can just do SDI1. So this links those two together. So when you physically plug in these cables, you're going to plug in your fill source to SDI1 and your alpha key source to SDI2. And then you're going to plug both of those into your video switcher as inputs. So this is a really key step here, is to set the DeckLink Duo card port 1 to link those two together. Okay, so we're going to save that and close that. Now if we jump over to ProPresenter, I'm going to run through this a little quick here. You're going to set up a screen for your lower thirds. So I'm going to go to Screens, Configure Screens. So you may already have some stuff set up. If you have this set up and working in a basic fashion already, you know, maybe I have this called Video. Maybe you have it called TVs, projector, whatever. That would be your main output source. That would display your lyrics full screen, maybe some motion backgrounds. If you play a video, it's going to display the video full screen, right? So if you have that set up, you'll already have at least one audience source. So you're going to make a new one by pressing the plus button up here. And then you can just double click or right click to go to rename. And you can name this however you want. So again, I have mine labeled video, which is my main screens with no cameras. It's just the full screen ProPresenter. And then I have lower thirds plus alpha. So this is a separate audience screen. So in my case, I have my full screen video linked to DeckLink Duo Port 2. And then when you create this new screen, lower thirds plus alpha, you're going to want to link it to the source of DeckLink Duo 1. And then as far as the resolution is concerned, you need to match whatever your Blackmagic ATEM video switcher is expecting. So in my case, my switcher is running at 1080i 59.94 frames. So I'm going to select that as the source. Okay. So now I have that set up. And then make sure your output target is full. And then we're going to go under the alpha key setting here. So this, you have to do this for it to work. So you're going to go to alpha key. You're going to say alpha type is pre-multiplied. It will likely default to none if you're making this brand new. So you're going to change it from none to pre-multiplied. Make sure your key type is external and your blend is at 100%. So that's going to tell ProPresenter out of this one screen to send what you really want plus an alpha key, which is the inverse of what you really want. Okay, so that's all set up as my screen. All right, so now let's set up and check our looks to make sure that they match. So let's go to Edit Looks. And I have plenty of looks here. You might have several yourself, but for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm just going to look at one of them. So I'm going to look at my worship look. This is set up in a church setting, so that's why it's called worship. Worship would be referring to the music time when the band is on stage singing. So I have my worship look, and you can see all of your screens. We're only you can ignore the second video for now. We're going to look at video, which is my in-room projectors, which does not have lower thirds, just the full screen from ProPresenter. And then we're going to look at my lower thirds plus alpha. Okay, so what's important here is my video screen. We're going to show the slide layer and the media layer because I use motion backgrounds. So that's going to put that in the room. And then on my lower thirds plus alpha, we're just going to show the slide layer, which is just the lyrics and any theme that come with the lyrics. Okay, we're not going to, so if you play a motion background, it'll hide it from the lower thirds layer and it will show it on my video layer or my TV's layer. So you really only need those set up unless you're using other stuff. And then you want to make sure you apply the appropriate themes. So ProPresenter has built-in themes. You can also make your own. So if you click on the theme or presentation, which lets you select a theme, you can go to the built-in themes. So let's say the black box theme. So you notice they have things set up here for lower thirds and things set up for in the middle of the screen. So I have some themes set up that I like. So here is my worship lower thirds theme, and you can see that it's just showing the lyrics small on the bottom of the screen, which would allow for the camera to show the rest of the way. And then I have my worship full theme, which has the text right in the center of the screen, and it's much larger. This allows for the motion background to show underneath. So in my video screen, I'm going to go to presentation and make sure it's worship full. On my lower thirds plus alpha, I'm going to go to presentation and make sure the theme is worship lower thirds. So when you click on a slide, for instance, I'm going to close this now, and I go to a song. When I click on this one slide that shows the lyrics, it's going to apply those themes to the two different screens differently. It's going to give me the lower thirds in an alpha key going out, and it's going to give me the full screen going to my TVs. So let me illustrate, and then I'll dig in a little further. So I'm going to click on this. You can see here in the ProPresenter preview that slide is now in the middle, nice and big, and it's applying that theme. And then if I go to my lower thirds, you can see that it has made it smaller on the bottom. So it's exactly what we want. All right, now if we jump over to my other camera here, you'll notice ProPresenter is up here in the top left. It's that lower screen there. And I'm going to actually jump back over to my switcher because I don't have it set right. I'm going to take a camera live. All right, back to the screen over here. So you can see ProPresenter is up here, and it's showing me those lower thirds. My drum cam is here, and then this is my output. So I've selected the drum cam as the output, and it is taking those lower thirds and it is putting them over top. So it's doing the inverse of that. All right, so I just moved my alpha key in here so you can see it. And if you look in this box right here, you see two white boxes. So that is the alpha key. That's the inverse of what I want. So what I really want is this black box with the words in it. So it's sending that, which is up here, plus the alpha key, which is that white box, which is the inverse of it. It's combining those two together, and it's taking the inverse, showing the words, and putting the camera behind it. So that's how you get that look in lower thirds. I'll illustrate this a few more ways and with some graphics as well. All right, so back over to ProPresenter. You don't necessarily have to use macros, but just to explain how I'm doing it, I do have a macro on this first slide, which is setting everything the way that I want it. So it's my worship macro here, worship-mt. So I'll dig into these actions real quick with you just so you can see what they are. So that worship look that we built earlier, so I have that worship look assigned to this macro. I have a slide destination of stage and audience because we want everybody to see it. I have a stage layout selected, which I'm not going to cover in this tutorial, but that's for the confidence monitors, the stage screens that the musicians see, so I have a separate layout for that. And then in my case, I have a clear all on this specific macro to make sure that anything previously that was on a video or whatever gets cleared. So it's going to apply that. So when I click this first slide, it sets that macro, sets the look that we set here in Edit Looks that we talked about earlier. This is where I set up what goes where, what the theme is, which then applies and gives that alpha key going out, and it all works in harmony. So how this works with graphics then, let me jump over to my announcements layer. All right, so if I activate this slide here, what I've got is on my media layer, I have a full screen graphic, and then it may be hard to see, but if I edit this slide, there's actually a separate graphic on top that's a lower third, okay? So that's on a separate layer, that's on the slide layer. So the big graphic is on the media layer, the small graphic is on the slide layer, and I'm using a look to separate those two. So when I click on it, you can see right here, my lower third alpha, it's just sending that lower third to my lower third alpha screen. And then if I go to my video screen, it's just sending the full screen here. Now if we jump to my other camera, as we illustrated previously, up here is what I want. That's the lower third showing. My alpha key is just that white box, so it's the inverse of that. It combines those two together. It puts what I want over the drum camera here, and it gives me exactly what I'm looking for. All right, now we're going to look at the settings in your ATEM video switcher to get this working. So every ATEM video switcher is a little different, but they all have this feature. So you may have a different number of inputs, you may have a different number of mix effects. Most of the baseline video switchers only have one mix effects. This essentially just means you can do two separate video mixes at a time. So I do have one that has two, but that really doesn't matter. And I have one that has, I believe, 16 inputs. So yours might have 4, yours might have 8. None of that really matters. You just need to plug in your fill source and your alpha key source from ProPresenter, separate outputs, separate video outputs. You need to plug those into your video switcher into 2 inputs. I do have mine labeled, so if you go into settings and we go to sources, you can see I have my ProPresenter. This is my fill source plugged into SDI1, and I have my alpha key plugged into SDI12, and I did just label those. So it's easier to identify them. If you don't label them, you'll have to go based on the input number, not the name. All right, so we're going to be dealing with upstream keys. So the ATEM video switchers have upstream keys and downstream keys. We're going to deal with the upstream keys, and you only need one key to do this. So we're going to look at upstream key 1 here. You just click on it to expand. You've got all sorts of options to set up. So today we're looking at setting up this alpha key, which is under the Luma tab. That's how you're going to set up an alpha key in your ATEM software. So you set it as Luma. Under settings, the fill source is what we labeled as ProPresenter. Again, if you didn't label it, you would just find the input number corresponding to what you plugged into. Fill source is your main ProPresenter source that has what you want to leave. on top, and then the key source is the alpha key. Again, if it's labeled alpha key, or it might be labeled an input. Okay, so you just set those two things. You can leave mask alone, and then you want to make sure pre-multiplied key is selected. Other than that, those are the only settings in your ATEM switcher to set up. And then once it's set up, it is this on-air button here. So this bank of on-airs right in the middle of your screen refer to the upstream keys. And over here on the right, these on-air buttons refer to your downstream keys, DSK. So upstream key 1 corresponds to this first on-air button that I currently have red. Upstream key 2 refers to this second one. So I currently have it on. You can click to turn it off. That is simply applying the key, and it will show your source on top of your video when this is on air. If you turn it off air, it will disable this altogether and would just show your camera. So it's as simple as picking your camera, camera 2, turning on air on, and then looking at the settings here. This on air button activates this fill source over top minus this alpha key. So that's a quick overview of how I have lower thirds working with ProPresenter 7, Blackmagic ATEM video switchers, and then you also need, in my case, an external video card. I'm using the Blackmagic DeckLink Duo. Because it's a Mac, I'm using an enclosure, a USB-C enclosure, to hook that card into, and then kind of explaining how to set that up. I will link to some of those resources below and a few other videos that might help walk you through some of the items I explained. Thanks for joining me today. Again, my name is Mike. You can always find out more on my website, technicallychurch.com, or on my YouTube channel, Technically Church. Look forward to seeing you soon.